going to be facing our lions or challenges of the week. What did you face this week that was challenging to you?
Well, good morning. And it is Motivational Monday around here today. Welcome to Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. So glad that you are here with me as we are motivating you to challenge yourself with shame or feelings about shame, I should say. Our podcast for this Motivational Monday is all about this thought. Shame derives its power from being unspeakable. And this quote, Brené Brown wrote this quote. My co-host and I are hoping that this is your day to get motivated. Let's get motivated as we are coming on today, this Motivational Monday. Before we think about feeling shame, our Vibe Talk question is going to ask you something that's going to require you to be able to challenge your lions, challenging yourself through your feelings and emotions, through shame. Good morning to my co-host, Trish. Good morning.
Good morning.
We want you to know that shame is toxic. When we feel toxic about it, we want to help you to appreciate that some of us have been shamed for doing things. Some of us are still walking around in the toxicity of shame. We want to help you to be able to conquer that. I like this quote, that shame is the emotion which gives us permission to be human. How many of you feel human when you are ashamed of something? And I'll tell you what people are ashamed of. People are ashamed of telling their stories. But I want you to realize something. Did you know that shame inspires others? Did you know that when you speak about the feeling of shame, you are able to have the power to inspire others? Think about that. The power that you hold in your hands to be able to say what made you feel shame. We're going to be talking about this, so stay tuned with us. Our Vibe Talk number is 661-503-8993. You are listening to us straight from our Facebook page. We also have YouTube. We want you to know that you can access Vibe Talk at any time of the day, even when we are offline. We are now streaming online wherever you're getting your favorite podcast. We want you to know that. We want you to know that. We want to talk about the definition of shame, but first we're going to go to this short commercial break. We'll be right back. Right back.
Tonight's discussion in Facing the Lion is
Did you know that you could ask Alexa or Siri for Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast? Try us out. Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast is all about your wellness, your being able to conquer your lions, whatever your lions are, which means challenges. Find Vibe Talk Facing the Lion, that is. Look for us wherever you listen to your podcast.
Facing the Lion is always positive.
We're back, and we are talking about feelings of shame. These feelings cause pain, distress, humiliation, and consciousness of wrong or foolish behavior. We know that there's so many of you out there. What has made you feel shamed? For me, it has been when I have yelled at my children. For me, it has been losing my temper. Maybe for you, it's been something else. Trish, what made you feel ashamed if you've ever had that feeling?
Something that makes me feel ashamed is when I get upset and when I'm very sad about something when I cry. So that's what makes me feel shame.
I want to talk about that. When you feel shame, here is the things I want you to remember. A lot of times people don't talk about it. It's unspoken words with them. Some people feel disgraced. Some people feel guilty. While other people are struggling with the feeling of numbness. We're going to really get into this. So stay tuned for Vibe Talk in our Monday. Challenge yourself through these feelings. It's really important. It's very important. We're going to talk about this. I want to talk about the psychological aspect of it, and I want you to quote me on this. I am not a doctor. I am a wellness coach, certifiably. I am, with many years of experience. Psychologically, what it causes is a highly self-conscious, unpleasant feeling. Uh, something that is dishonorable, something that creates for you a sense of devalue. I want you to think about that and where you have felt devalued. And I want to get into where a lot of these feelings start from. And I'm going to get right into it. So today's podcast is for mature audiences. When we think about sexual abuse, when we think about emotional abuse, we feel ashamed. How? What is the number one thing that we feel ashamed not to do when that's happening to us? Have you thought about that, Trish?
Well, I've never been through that before, but me personally, I feel because I've felt shame of being single before. So I stayed in a relationship because I was afraid to be by myself. I was ashamed to be by myself, knowing that that relationship wasn't good for me. So I'd say shame of being alone.
Okay, shame of being alone. I like that because that's important. How many of you have felt that before? Many people are still out here, even today, feeling ashamed of having been sexually abused, having been emotionally abused, and even physical abuse. People are ashamed of that. Why is there so much shame that goes on with that? People don't talk about it. And that's why there's so many people, when they finally talk about it, they are freeing themselves from that shame of unpleasant feelings, of disgrace, more or less judging themselves before anybody else can judge them. Trish, you talked about staying in relationships. You know, people say, well, why are you in that relationship even though you are living in shame that you've put on yourself? That is toxic. We're going to be talking about that as well. Now, many people feel judged. Trisha spoke on that, criticized, or even rejected for having the emotion of shame. Today is our opportunity to talk about shame. And Vibe Talk does this in a very dignified way. We want you to know that because we know that we are touching hearts and minds. And by the way, what am I thankful for today? I'm thankful that you are here to join me, and I'm mostly thankful that Hurricane Hillary has reminded us of safety. We are safe here in California. We are thinking about those who are affected because we have floods. We had 3 earthquakes in California yesterday. We want to be mindful of why be thankful. So shame. What has caused you shame? Are you ashamed to tell your story? Because you see, your story is going to indeed inspire someone. When you're ready to free yourself from feeling judged or criticized or even feeling rejected, because it's about time that you, yes, you, in the feeling of shame. That's what we're talking about. Our lines are open for you, and we want you to understand and realize that shame has causes and effects. We are talking about shame and when it has entered our lives. What can we do about it? How do we deal with it? We internalize our feelings. How many of us have internalized any feeling that we've ever had? That means feeling something from the deepest part of our emotion. How many of us have done that? You are really feeling it. You know the feeling when you say, ooh, I felt that? That's internalized.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
Go ahead, Trish.
I said, yeah, I know that feeling. I feel that when something relates to me and I just say, oh, I felt that, or that was real, that was deep,
Yeah.
that sort of feeling.
Internalizing. That's exactly what that means. We're going to be right back. Stay tuned. You want to get with Vibe Talk? We have personal sessions, one-on-one, and group sessions. Get with Vibe Talk directly through our Facebook page at Vibe Talk or Instagram Vibe Talk, and even our direct connect 661-503-8993. Remember, it's Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. We're back, and my co-host and I are talking about shame. We know that shame makes anyone feel uncomfortable. When we internalize these negative feelings about ourselves, what does it create? Our own personal insecurities, secrets, mistakes, and everyone perceives their own flaws to the detriment of themselves. All of this causes triggers because of the shame that you carry. People become embarrassed, self-critical, denying themselves self-compassion, and almost at all costs avoiding opening up to even those closest around them. But when we think about shame and that feeling of being deeply ashamed, we want to be able to think about our being able to value. We all have stories. And even if you're in therapy, I want you to remember that your stories stay safe. And that's why we offer you one-on-one counseling all through virtual access. We are, again, a podcast that deals with your feelings and emotions. We want to be able to talk with you. So shame, self-critical thoughts. When we think about this emotion, it's triggering. What does it trigger? How you feel about you internally. Self-judgment. How many of you are familiarized with self-judging? Let's start with ourselves because we talk about this quite often. How many of you self-judge yourself? I do.
I do.
Yeah. But we want you to think about the mirror talk, finding your value. The mirror talk has been one of the remedies that I have used. You know, I had someone say to me, they've done the mirror talk. Yeah, everybody can do it by themselves, but it's a technique, it's an art to it. When you are able to discover not the worst about yourself, the mirror talk is designed for you to be able to have a deep look within yourself and then find and discover the value of oneself. Because many times people want to ignore that mirror talk. But oh boy, is it ever, just 1 minute, is it ever so important that we do this? Why do you think it is helpful? Because it helps you to think about yourself. Positive or negative versus positive. When we feel bad about ourselves, we're feeling either inadequate or unworthy. How many of you have felt unworthy of something? I have. I have. You
I have.
are your worst enemy. When I tell people that, they don't believe me. But I am either my worst enemy or my best friend. There are times when I want to be my best friend. There's a need for that. But because of shame and guilt of things that we have experienced, we reject being our own best friend. We feel unworthy of opportunities. And sometimes we avoid greater opportunities because of the shame that we've been carrying around so long. Now, we want to look at shame. If shame were a color, and I want to tell you something, I want you all to work on something, and that's a color pattern for you. What would your color be and why? What would your color be and why? That's going to give you a look, a feel, because color attracts us or detracts us. And so we use that color pattern because when we're in childhood, we learn about the primary colors. We learn how to mix colors. It all starts right there. That's why that's so important. But now, your shame. If I were to say to you, pick a color, what color would your shame be? Trish, what do you think the color of your shame would be? Mine would be
Dark blue.
red. Shame.
I said mine would be
I
dark
heard you.
blue.
Yeah, you see how we both have a different experience? We know that this podcast is a very matured one today, but we want to talk about the triggers. Today, we're just going to ask you, what color would it be? Because we're designed to help you to understand how it triggers. Sometimes we live with age-old shame that we've been carrying around since we were first able to speak. Some of us have no recollection of why we carry shame. And just in case you guys are wondering, we are online right now. You can find us on our Facebook page. The reason I'm saying that, because I want you to go and find the book. Tricia, if you could be as kind as to write it down so that they can see it. That book is Feelings Buried Alive, Never Die. We're not going to tell you what to do. We're only going to give you the art project. Shame is one of the most difficult and painful emotion that you or I could ever experience. So when we imagine or are being triggered by the experiences that have happened in our lives, it does become painful for us. I want to talk about struggles many of you have hid behind your emotions. And Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast helps you from step one how to deal with your emotions. Why? Because I've been through it, and it's helped me to be able to talk about my emotions, my experience. No longer hiding that, but releasing. What is it that we need to release? The feeling of pain. Not hiding that. Being able to come to with full-faced realization that it is, in fact, your story. Sometimes hiding behind that shame are other emotions. What do you think other emotions are? And we want you to be able to write in the chat box or even tell us on our stream podcast. Don't forget to tell us where you are. We're going to be right back to talk about other feelings that shame brings. We'll be right back. Stay with us. We're back. Bringing forth other emotions. Shame creates fear. How many of us have ever had fear? In addition
I have.
to the shame you have, and what was that like for you?
It made me um necessarily not go into other relationships because I was so ashamed of what I've been through before. So I'm still afraid to get into relationships because of that. So fear made me very guarded when I meet people and get interested in people. I don't go to the next level because of that shame.
Shame is also, for me, created fear and anger. Fear of not really saying how I really felt, especially to loved ones that you really love. And here's the thing, the fear of hurting them, you know, and passing it off as if nothing happened was what I chose to do. And because of doing that, it made me angry. How many of you have been angry because something happened, but you couldn't tell your loved because you wanted to protect them.
I have.
Yeah. You know, there have been people who have been robbed. I want to talk about this because I want to try to motivate someone today on this Monday motivation in our challenges to face shame. My older son was working in a liquor store. I'm not going to say the name because if I said it, you all would know yet. And everyone in the family kept saying it's not a good place to work. It's dangerous. You're working midnight hours, this or that. We begged and pleaded for him to find another job. We're on live podcasting, and thank you for joining us. If you're on for the first time, tell us where you're from. Tell us where you're from. We're live on Facebook, and we are Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. We're talking about shame. Going back to the story, one night he was robbed at gunpoint and also hit in the head with a gun. Here's where the shame came in. He didn't tell me. Police showed up at my door sometime later. We're talking about days later. And I finally realized after being so hysterical, because when you see the police come, you automatically think it's one of your loved ones. My oldest does not live with me, so I automatically thought they're going to tell me my son is dead, and I'm hysterical. And I begged the police to tell me. And he said, ma'am, I'm not supposed to tell you, but I can see that you're really distressed, and I don't want to leave you like this. He said, your son was robbed at gunpoint. Thank Jehovah God that he is still alive. I thought, why would he not tell me? Do you suppose that perhaps he felt, wow, what everybody told me came true? Sometimes things happen and we feel ashamed about it. But you know what I see with my son? I see his struggle to strength. I am sure that because that happened, that his shame has led him to be consciously aware of things. See, we don't shame somebody when something happens like that because that's tragic. What I'm ever more thankful for is that he is alive and well. Does that motivate you and inspire? I think about, gosh, why didn't he come and tell me no matter how I was going to react? We want you to be able to tell your story because one day I'm going to have him tell that story because it's his story. People respond to themselves in a very negative way. And our first thing that we say to people when we hear what we think is shame is shame on you. Let's stop doing that. Let's stop doing that. Because, see, we want to not push people away, but listen to them. Listen to them and how they feel without pushing them away. Sometimes we do that without even knowing that we're doing that. It's our reaction. When we think about shame, we think about what the behaviors are of shame. We think about behaviors that might go against what you or I think is normal. And we know that shame, thank you for joining us, shame can happen at any time. And if you all have felt like that, these feelings of rejection because you feel shamed are unwarranted. You are to be valued, not shamed. Everyone has insecurity. How many of you all have insecurity? I do. Some of us,
I do.
yeah, some of us have hidden insecurities, but now we might be able to work out our challenges with these insecurities if we talk about them, if we challenge ourselves. Um, we want to think about what shame does to a person. Shame causes and creates worthlessness. I don't want anybody to feel that way. I want you to be able to think about what you have done to yourself carrying that around. It is debilitating to carry that type of shame around. We also think about people's mental health, and that's what we're into here, mental and emotional health. Because of shame that people have felt, anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress. How many of you have had those feelings because you felt shame for something? And sometimes it is not even your fault. Stay with us. Let us know where you're from if you're online. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We're going to talk about causes of shame. We'll be right back. We're back. And thank you for joining. Thank you for putting that up. We simply want to create for you, to challenge yourself through every emotion. If I were to ask of you to write a list of negative things about yourself that you feel about yourself, you would probably write a story versus thinking in a more positive mindset. If I were to ask you to take a self-assessment, you're going to make up your own critical self-assessment, but I'm not going to ask you to do that because you all have overkill. Why do I know that? Because I do it to myself. I could not find anything that was of self-worth. And if you're like me, I had to really learn taking baby steps to see myself and my worth through much guided help. You know, we all have negative traits, things we don't like about ourselves. We all make mistakes. There's a saying, to err is human. Remember that. Sometimes we lose sight when we're in the struggle of shame to remember our strengths and ability and our positive quality. What I would say to my son and what I have said to my son, you are here to tell your story. And that's what I say to you. Pull up your chair a little closer. Can you hear me? You are here to tell your story. Regardless of any shame that you may feel, you're here. You have survived that in which it's caused you shame. Find value in yourself. Sometimes these beliefs we have about ourselves, even if they hold some truth, we greatly distort ourselves and exaggerate so that our mistakes become magnified. People are still struggling with real shame. We want to think about our situation and what happens during any given situation. We go through that situation. Some of our situations are not planned. It just happens. What we want is to see how you're responding to your situation. Sometimes we have shaming experiences and we start to internalize negatively. Women who have been ashamed of rape constantly have blamed themselves. We want you to realize, though it may not have been our experience, may or may not, that you struggled through it. And every woman or every man that has been raped, sexually assaulted, even beknownst to all of us, you struggled through it. Many who weren't so fortunate have been unsung heroes because nobody knew their story. What the investigators of these people that have been murdered have realized that through DNA or through skin, they struggled. You're still our heroes. See, it's when you don't struggle. I want you to become not an unsung hero, but someone who has spoke out. Someone who has spoke out. We have many stories. We have stories where a man killed his twin daughters while his wife was listening on the phone. She is our hero because she stood up, found her strength through that horrific shame that she felt for not being able to help her children, her twins, survive. She's now talking about her story. Do you find strength in your story? We want you to remember nothing can keep you from being accepted or loved but you. Find the challenge through shame, any shame that you could ever do. First, accepting yourself and loving yourself. You are worthy. We talk about different kind of abuses because we realize that they're out there. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about that. We are not a hiding podcast. We're going to get into it right after this message. We'll be right back. Did you know that Vibe Talk is now streaming on all of your favorite podcasts? As well, you can now ask Alexa and Siri for Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast latest episode. We're back. So now, traumatic experiences. If you are listening, there is 1 to 5 people in your group, wherever you're hanging around, whoever is your circle, that have experienced these things in which they feel ashamed of. They or you, sexual, physical, emotional. We realize that even young children have no voice. And so it seems there's no one to fight for them when they have experienced traumatic things such as this. Now I want to bring something to maybe help yourself. Can you imagine a child having that kind of traumatic experience and not knowing what to do about it? And yet, you don't even know that it's happening. Children with no understanding of what is happening to them internalize these things and blame themselves. And what do they start to develop? Can you imagine? At a mere age of 5 years old, being so traumatized that you blame yourself. From 5 all the way into adulthood. Some have even had these things that they've been shamed into at a very younger age. Some have no recollection. So let's think about this. Let's help everyone by listening to their stories. See, it's one thing to tell your story, but it's a whole other thing to hear your story. Let's have that kind of intent. You know, when we shame ourselves, these are our lasting emotional impacts. Sometimes I've made the mistake of comparing my younger child to the older child. But we don't want to do that because that brings on negativity. And I'll say things like, your brother, he's not doing that. Well, of course not, because they are 2 different individuals. So as a parent, I need to recognize that I can throw my child into shame, letting him feel these negative thoughts. Let's stop comparing one another. How many of you have ever been scolded for making a mistake? Anybody?
I have.
What was that like for you?
I felt bad. I was actually crying because it hurt my feelings because my mom, she scolded me for forgetting about the pot. It was on the stove and I forgot, even though that's very dangerous. That's nothing to forget about. But she scolded me when the house was smoking and the smoke detector
Yeah,
went off.
yeah. Me, I think scolding my children, even as young adults, I don't want to make them feel bad, but I want to make them aware. So what I have to do, and here's my reveal, is to use my words carefully, carefully, with the intent of them knowing I truly do love them and that I believe in their capability. I'm going to leave that right there for those of you who get what I'm saying. So now, how many of you have made a mistake and it resulted in someone being hurt and you couldn't forgive yourself? You could not forgive yourself. I'm going to tell you something. That mother that had her only two daughters who were twins killed lived with this thought. If only she didn't take them to their dad. If only she had a. But I want to say to you all, I want to say to you all, I'm getting your feedbacks. I'm getting your feedback. I want to say to you all, and if I could say to her right now, she did what she thought was good in allowing her children to visit their dad. This is not an excuse for what happened. Had she known that was going to happen, I don't think for 1 minute she would have left them. But see, she felt shame and guilt and probably struggles through that, although her story is very inspiring. Now we're going to talk about being bullied. We know that that is trending. The new school year has barely just begun. Children being bullied for how they looked. Those children who are doing the bullying are deprived of something as well. Think about that. We need to listen as parents, as teachers, administrators, family members to what is going on. If you never ask your child what happened at school today, how was school, you'll never know. Don't just accept school was fine, because a lot of those children, what happens is they don't talk about it. We need to challenge our children. We need to look for signs. We all know our children, even our grown adult children. We've lived with them forever. If they're acting different, that is because something is different. Look and see. Look and find out. Don't leave it up to the teachers. As being an educator myself, I know how valuable that is. One mother was astounded at the fact when she came into her child's room, there in the closet, her daughter had hung herself. Now, why do you think? Why do you suppose that happened? When they're 11, in any age, they should be able to go to school and not feel ashamed. Not feel ashamed for how they look, what they wear, what they say, what they eat. Mother was astounded that her dead child was hanging from the closet. Well, how did she deal with it? Now it is her story. But I say to you, parents, about your children, being shamed. And you grown folks that are out there shaming these children, they are not without help. We want to hear your stories if you've ever had this happen. We want to reach out to the schools. We want to reach out to anyone that will listen. How about this one? Receiving love that feels conditional because your parents pride you in your sports, your academic level of success. The operative word here is conditional. We want you to unconditionally love your children. You teachers, help your student to do better. Don't shame them. I had a colleague of mine come to me being newly in a school, and she said to me, how do I not shame this particular student? Thank you for joining Vibe Talk Facing the Lion. Our topic today is shame. How do we challenge ourselves not to feel that way? Going back to the story, the teacher asked for my help in helping that student. We all have different things, but never shame a child. And you parents who push your kids into sports, do you ever find out if your child ever wanted to do the sports to begin with? Think about that and love them unconditionally. So you can show yourself unashamed by loving them unconditionally. How about this one? Growing up in a house where it was shameful to show or talk about feelings. How many of us have felt that? Or we saw that our parents didn't talk about feelings. You know, a lot of parents may have grown up in angry households and they said, well, we never knew why our parent was angry. You parents, think about this. We're asking that you talk about things, or there are people that have lived in households where when something came up, the parents didn't talk in front of the children. Let's think about that. How about having a deeply guarded family secret? And you, yes, you were expected to keep and protect it. Every family has secrets. Every family. But now, is it a secret that as you've now grown up into adulthood, that you reflect back on and it needed to be talked about? Needed to be talked about. How about this one? We'll be right back. We need to take a break. We'll be right back with more on facing your lions through feeling shame. We'll be right back. Vibe Talk Facing the Lion here. Did you know that Vibe Talk Facing the Lion can now be searched through your Google, Siri, and even Alexa? Go ahead. I dare you to ask for Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. We're back, and we're talking about shame, how we get through it, looking at it from your perspective. How many of you have ever felt ashamed from where or how you grew up and how much money you had? How many of you have felt that kind of shame? When I was a kid, I thought my parents had money. And as a grown adult, I said to my mom, Mom, we were rich. She said, we weren't rich. So I didn't have that problem, but yes, I did go to school with people like that who felt shamed. I did go to school with people like that. I've dealt with students who have felt that way. And I want you to know something. Despite however you lived, however you grew up, you are our hero because you survived it. There's nothing to be ashamed for. How about parents or caregivers that put upon you unrealistic expectations? I want to talk about something that is so close to my heart because I am a retired educator for the young, hopefully, and still young or teaching young people. What I want to say is that when we started this podcast, we got a call. And the call was about a young person that had called in and was so stressed out because their parent expected all A's from them because they wanted them to get into a college. Stressed, feeling ashamed that they had received a C on their paper. To me, how I felt about that is that child had anxiety and stress, possible fear of what the other parent would think. Is it right to do that? Because you see, a C is a passing grade. I'm going to leave that right there. How many of us have been frequented? Somebody's always criticizing or disapproval or comparison. Are we doing that? Now, my reveal is that I find myself doing that to my younger son when he is in fact his own individual. But when I get angry, I'm always saying, I never had to do this with your brother. Do you think I need to stop that? Wait a minute. I'll answer it. I think so. Because if I want positive response, I need a positive thought. Let's think about this. Whether or not shame is going to develop in any type of experience we have, we understand that so many of you have internalized it. So many of you have toxified it, if you will. Especially our children and our young teens. This is a very vulnerable age. You've got to grow up one day, and parents, educators, whoever's listening, these young ones have to grow up. We don't want them to internalize these experiences so that it becomes internalized shame. I want to think about that. We know that shame affects our mental health. When you feel ashamed, they only breed negative thinking. So how do we change that? What do we do? We want to think about you, with you and yourself in mind. Think about how you think and feel and what you do with that. Let's think about how we do. We want to think about our thoughts and our feelings. We want to think about in our thinking pattern, what can we do better? What are we good at? Every one of you, while you feel ashamed, while you have packaged shame and internalized it, your feelings are real. But every one of you has something of value. When we think negatively about ourselves, some feel embarrassed, humiliated, hide it, withdraw. But we want you to know that self-destructive behavior is on the rise. We complain and we say such and such is this or that. Why are there so many kids out here that are dying like flies? They are more superior than just a fly. We wonder. But how many of those children who have dropped dead from fentanyl and other things at such a young age, they're leaving us before our very grandparents. Our grandparents are burying the young. Why is there so much longevity in older people? We need to listen. We need to hear the sound of shame. Be not judging. Be not self-critical. I'm talking to you. Let's get down to the bare necessities of why we are carrying shame. After all, does shame really deprive from your power? Have you left it unspoken? We'll be right back with Trisha's Treasures. We'll be right back.
It's my life. It's my life.
Vibe Talk Facing the Lion is on our very own Facebook page. Check us out. Look for our live and join in our live and interactive podcast. Our direct connect is 661-503-8993. We are back, and it's time for Trisha's Treasures. Trish?
Something that stuck out to me the most in this podcast today was shame making people feel like more human. And I thought about it, like I sat here and thought, what am I ashamed of, and what mistakes have I made that I'm ashamed to talk about? And I thought, you know what? Shame does allow me to feel the feelings that I am afraid to feel, and it also can block me from progressing and being at a better place where I should be. Many times I was ashamed to tell my story because, for one, I'm value I value my privacy, and also because I'm embarrassed. I feel humiliated about who I was before, with suicidal thoughts and self-hatred. And many times I told people that have felt like me my story, and especially friends, and they were like, I didn't know you felt like that. Like, are you serious? That's how you felt? And it made me feel like, well, if I told them how I felt the first time, would it change their reaction? Would it change how I dealt with it? And it's so important to talk about who you were the first time, because there are many people that think you were always a butterfly. They didn't know about your caterpillar stage and you transforming from your cocoon. They didn't know about that. And it's important to talk about your transformation. Don't be ashamed of your transformation, because for the better, because it can motivate somebody with your story. Don't be afraid to tell your story. I was, and in Vibe Talk, it allows me to share my story, and in my music, it allows me to share my story. Sometimes I'm ashamed to talk about it in my music, but I replace that shame with motivation, saying, I gotta do it. Like, I have to talk about it because, like you, I felt alone. I felt like no one related to me. Who's gonna understand that I felt depression? Who's gonna understand my self-hate? Who's gonna understand that I feel lonely in how I'm feeling? If someone just told me I felt that way too, that was in my circle, then possibly it would change, or I know it would change my aspect on feeling alone. So don't be ashamed of who you were, and talk about how you got to where you are right now. And if you are in shame of who you are right now, trust and believe that this is a season, and all seasons change, from the coldest of winter to the hottest and festive summers. So be proud of what you are, what you have, and cherish that.
Thank you for that. We'll be right back. Vibe Talk Facing the Lion has Vibe Talk Reels. Go check them out. And our Vibe Talk podcast is always recorded live. Go check out our latest podcast wherever your favorite podcasts are streaming. It's Vibe Talk Facing the Lion podcast. We're back. Did you all know that there are 3 types of shame? Let's talk about the first one as a wrap up: body shaming. Whether you have been body shamed or not, whether it is your weight, your body shape, your physical appearance. People are trending this. Let's stop that. Let's be who we are and safe in our own skin. The other, behavioral shame experienced that have been impacted by what people have said or done, or what people have not said or done. Behavioral shame. This one, characterological shame. You're being a person judged on things perceived, such as your personality, your flaws, your weaknesses, globalized, that you are a certain type of person, that you are a moral person or an immoral person, about being bad, unworthy, or unlovable. Let's stop this shame. So, have you learned about shame? We hope that Vibe Talk Facing the Lion has motivated you to think about, to speak about the fears, the guilt that you carry with shame. Our last question of the day is, what did you learn and discover about yourself for this podcast on facing shame? And how did it make you feel? That is our Vibe Talk last question. Trish, we're going to start with you.
First, I've learned that shame doesn't just come out of the blue. It comes from somewhere. It has a foundation, whether it's from my childhood or experience in a certain situation. And what I discovered about myself is it does hurt when other people shame me, but it affects me the most when I do it to myself. It causes me to progress very slowly because I did it to myself. I have a negative impact on me sometimes when I shame myself. And my experience here today was very triggering. Like, today was a big blow on, wow, okay, I need some self-reflection. I have some work to do on me. So, yeah, that was my experience here today.
Thank you. For me, I am always discovering something new in every podcast, so I don't take it for granted as being a host. What I have learned is that it's better to speak about that of which you felt ashamed for. And it's better to be truthful because you do carry those feelings around and they are very triggering. So let's get together. Let's talk about it in a safe space. I felt like this was for mature audiences and parents. Uh, it's up to you if you want to hear, if you want your children or your minors to hear this podcast today because it deals with things in the open. And we want to let you be the judge of that. But I felt that it was needed. And I'm hoping that Trisha and I, as co-host and host, have motivated you in understanding that your power should never be unspoken. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to say thank you for sending Gettys from Shingle Springs, California. Thank you for joining Vibe Talk and liking our page. Another person I would like to thank is Latoya and Joe Howard, all the way from Winter Haven, Florida. Thank you for liking our reels. Trish, is there anybody that you would like to thank?
No.
Okay. So if you want to join Vibe Talk, we're right here on our very own page. You can even say hi to us. We're streaming on all podcasts. Check us out. Thank you for joining Vibe Talk. Thank you, Trish, for being my amazing co-host. Thank you. And we want to thank you, viewers and listeners. What we'd like to have you do as we ask questions, as you hear from us, be brave, stand up, reach up, reach out. That makes you lion strength. And if you don't have the courage to speak, why, that's okay. Just say hello. We will acknowledge you over the air. Thank you all for listening to Vibe Talk, Facing Challenges, Facing Shame. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on another episode of Vibe Talk, Facing the Lion. Yeah, when you get the vibe with it, yeah.